We've got the sweetest out here. That's policeman. Forget it.
Dean Martin spent his final years alone in a dark house on Maple Drive. He barely spoke to anyone. Not even Frank Sinatra could reach him. But he was writing pages no one knew existed until after Christmas 1995. Inside were secrets about his 20-year silence with Jerry Lewis, about what really happened behind the Rat Pack image, about the guilt he carried after his son died in that mountain crash. The world saw a man who floated through life. What he left behind tells a very different story. Dean Martin's story begins in a small house in Steubenville, Ohio, where the only language anyone spoke was Italian. His parents filled the rooms with their own words, so Dino Paul Crocetti didn't speak a single word of English until he turned 5. When he walked into Grant Elementary School, he carried that accent with him, and the other kids heard it right away. They mocked every broken sentence, every slip, every sound that came out a little different. He felt those laughs settle under his skin. He felt the sting of being an outsider in a place that was supposed to be home. Much later, he explained it in a few plain words, saying he had been the only kid who couldn't speak English and that the others laughed at him every day. Those early wounds pushed him to build a calm mask that never cracked, a cool surface that made him look unbothered, even when he wasn't. It became his armor throughout his life. As he grew older, school didn't feel like a place where he belonged. He stepped into Steubenville High School and made it to the 10th grade, but every day felt more like a fight than a lesson. The English he learned still felt clumsy in his mouth, and he couldn't find a rhythm with his teachers or classmates. He joked later that he was too smart for the teachers, but the truth ran deeper. He didn't trust the world inside the classroom. At 16, he walked away from high school and decided life would teach him more than any textbook. People around him were shocked, but the choice came from years of feeling out of place. That moment pushed him out into a world where he would have to create his own path from nothing. Life didn't go easy on him. Before Dean Martin even turned 18, he stepped into jobs most grown men would fear. He delivered illegal liquor during Prohibition, carrying bottles through the night and hoping the police or rival gangs wouldn't catch him. He worked in steel mills where the air burned his lungs and injuries were just part of the day. He dealt blackjack at illegal gambling dens that were run by men everyone else avoided. He moved among mob-connected figures like Jimmy Tripodi and Cosmo Quattrone, watching how they controlled the streets. Those years carved a tough edge into him. By 18, he had already seen things that hardened him and taught him to survive. When he was 16, he slipped into a boxing ring and fought under the name Kid Crochet, a playful twist on his real surname, Crocetti. He stepped in as a welterweight and fought 36 bouts, winning 25 and losing 11. He joked later that he had won all but 11 of his dozen fights, a quiet way of hiding the bruises that lingered. His nose broke, his lips split, his knuckles cracked again and again. Boxing never turned him into a star, but it did shape the grit that stayed with him for life. The nickname Kid Crochet stuck for a while, a reminder of the days when he thought he could punch his way out of poverty. When he moved to New York City, the struggle didn't let up. He shared a tiny apartment with his friend Sonny King, and their money stretched so thin, they started letting people pay $5 to watch them fight bare knuckle in the living room. They fought until one of them hit the floor, bruised and dazed. The fights helped them pay rent and kept them from going hungry, but they left a mark on Martin's pride. He spoke about those nights later with a strange mix of humor and shame, as if he could laugh at his own desperation while remembering how close he came to losing hope. It was one of the lowest moments in their lives, yet it kept them alive just a little longer. The turning point arrived one night inside the ring when he faced Sonny King for real. Their amateur match barely lasted a round before Martin knocked out his best friend. The guilt hit him harder than any punch. He stood there stunned, realizing he had hurt someone he cared about more than he cared about the sport itself. From that moment on, he knew boxing wasn't his future. He couldn't keep hurting people, especially not someone he depended on. He walked away from the ring forever, That choice softened something in him and pushed him toward a different kind of life, one that didn't involve fists or blood. Stepping away from boxing pushed him back toward the world he already knew too well. He found work in an illegal casino hidden behind a tobacco shop in Steubenville. He started as a stock boy, then learned to deal cards and handle roulette. The casino belonged to the same mobsters who ruled the town, and working for them meant danger was always close. But inside those smoky rooms, he learned to stay calm when the stakes were high. He figured out how to read people without showing any reaction. It was there that he built the cool, unshakable presence that later made him look so smooth on stage and screen. The underworld sharpened his ability to stay relaxed when everything around him spun out of control. Around this time, he started singing under the name Dino Martini, borrowing the name from opera star Nino Martini. He performed in small clubs, and the same underworld figures who watched over him in the casino helped him get gigs. They protected him from rivals and kept trouble away. Their help made him feel both safe and trapped. He was climbing toward a career, but he was climbing through dangerous territory. The name Dino Martini became the first real step toward the world he wanted, a world where singing could lift him out of the life he had grown up in. The deeper he went into show business, the more he realized the mob's reach stretched far beyond Steubenville. In the 1940s, he worked at gambling fronts run by Tripodi and Quattrone, two men whose influence extended through the Cleveland Mafia. He dealt cards at Quattrone's cigar shop. He spent time in the Jungle Inn in Youngstown, a mob casino known across the region. Federal documents later showed Tripodi met with big names like Anthony Milano, Sam Giancana, Antonio Ripepi, Anthony Zerilli, and Rocco Pellegrino. Their network crossed states and families. Dean Martin stood close enough to see it all. He visited places like the Venetian and the Baron, and even years later, FBI files recorded him showing up at mob hangouts during his Rat Pack fame. He stayed connected to that world long after most performers would have run from it. Those connections followed him into his early fame. According to FBI files and biographies, mob bosses like Sam Giancana would request Martin specifically. When Giancana wanted entertainment, he would say he needed Dean Martin for 10 days, and Martin would show up. It was his way of repaying favors from his early life. Surveillance reports from the late 1950s and early 1960s placed him at parties, saloons, and private gatherings run by mob leaders. Sometimes important decisions were made in the same rooms where Martin stood singing or sharing drinks. He never seemed intimidated. He showed loyalty long after he had the power to walk away. Unlike many performers who broke ties once they became successful, Martin didn't distance himself. Even at his peak with the Rat Pack, he still performed in mob-owned venues. FBI notes from the 1960s described him appearing at Chicago saloons and mingling with figures he had known since his youth. That loyalty marked him as someone who never forgot where he came from, even when where he came from was filled with danger. His presence in those places became part of his story, a constant thread that ran through his entire life. Dean Martin first crossed paths with Jerry Lewis in 1944 inside the small, smoky rhythm of the Glass Hat Club in New York. Both were scraping through each night, hoping the next gig would pay enough to keep the lights on. Dean was gliding through songs with that smooth voice people leaned into, while Jerry was younger and still trying to figure out what worked. He had a strange act where he lip-synced to records, and most crowds didn't know what to do with it. When the club finally emptied and chairs scraped across the floor, they shared stories, tricks, and laughter, like two kids discovering the same secret. One night, Jerry looked at Dean and simply asked if he was working, and that one short question somehow opened a path between them. Soon they were practicing little ideas at the Havana, Madrid, and the bond grew inside those long nights where only the toughest performers survived. Neither of them felt important yet, but something was forming that would change American entertainment in a way neither man could have predicted. Everything shifted on July 25, 1946, when they walked into the 500 Club in Atlantic City. It was supposed to be a normal night until the scheduled singer didn't show up. Jerry pushed for Dean to take the spot, and somehow they talked their way onto the stage. Their first show nearly killed the chance. The crowd didn't respond. Skinny D'Amato threatened to fire them if they didn't fix it, so they threw the script away. Dean started singing, and Jerry crashed onto the stage dressed as a busboy, dropping plates and interrupting every line. People roared. The shock of seeing chaos mixed with charm spread fast. Within days, lines curled down the block, and the club lit up the whole neighborhood. What began as desperation turned into a new style of performance that mixed music with wild physical comedy. They didn't know it, but that rush was their beginning. The rise that followed came unbelievably fast. Within months, they were earning $30,000 a week. A few months earlier, they were making barely over $150 each. Women melted for Dean's voice, and men couldn't stop laughing at Jerry's unpredictable energy. By 1950, at the Copacabana, crowds pressed against each other just to get close. Their act wasn't just popular, it was a shift in the entire nightclub scene. They turned evenings into events, and every other duo that came after walked the path they carved. Hollywood saw the craze and pulled them in. Between 1949 and 1956, they appeared in 16 films. Movies like My Friend Irma, The Stooge, Living It Up, and Artists and Models pushed Jerry's comedy to the front. Slowly, Dean realized he was becoming the straight man, the one who set the stage so Jerry could shine. It hurt him. He started drinking more and carrying resentment he didn't always talk about. By 1956, their relationship had grown so strained that Dean barely spoke to Jerry during productions. On the last day of Hollywood or Bust, on June 19, 1956, they avoided each other completely. When they performed live for the final time on July 25, 1956, exactly 10 years after the 500 Club debut, the magic was no longer there. The breakup marked the end of something people thought would last forever. Television and radio only made their names bigger, but the tension backstage grew heavier. Shows like the Colgate Comedy Hour brought them into millions of homes. People thought the fire between them was real harmony, not knowing the private storms brewing behind curtains. Dean's frustration cut deeper each year. Jerry's creative control kept growing. The charm they showed the world faded as their private distance widened. By 1956, even their walk to the Copacabana stage felt like a slow march toward goodbye. Everything snapped on February 14, 1955. They were filming Artists and Models when Dean exploded after holding it in for years. Jerry came over to talk about script changes. Dean's patience broke. His voice rose. He said Jerry was nothing but a dollar sign to him. Cast and crew froze. A joke Dean made about Jerry's wife pushed everything too far. Jerry walked away, shaken. Everyone understood something had cracked, and once cracked, it wouldn't mend. That moment became the point people still talk about when explaining why the end was unavoidable. The strain grew even clearer on July 18, 1955, during a photo shoot. Cameras captured smiles that looked real from the outside, but the silence between them was louder than any flash. Witnesses said the energy felt lifeless. Dean wouldn't look at Jerry, and Jerry kept his eyes anywhere but Dean's. Those photos ended up in magazines everywhere. Proof that something was falling apart, even if the world didn't know the details. Filming Hollywood or Bust in 1956 brought that tension to its peak. Jerry later said he told the director he wouldn't say what he felt to Dean, so the director took all the heat. Dean didn't hide his anger anymore. He called Jerry nothing more than a dollar sign. Crew members tried to keep them apart. People on set described the atmosphere as Arctic, the kind of cold you feel even in warm rooms. Yet the movie got made, and when it came out in December 1956, the split had already happened. Then came July 25, 1956, at the Copacabana. 500 guests filled the room. Frank Sinatra, Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, and many others watched as the curtain rose at 11:30 that night. The applause lasted 3 long minutes. They performed with the smoothness they were known for, but the sadness under the surface made the night unforgettable. People knew they were seeing the end of an era. After the lights dimmed on their final show, silence replaced everything. 20 years passed without a word exchanged. Jerry tried reaching out through others, but Dean wanted no part of it. He said he didn't want to see him or hear his name. Dean felt invisible during their partnership. Jerry felt abandoned. The silence became one of the longest feuds in entertainment, proving how much pain can hide behind applause. Years later, Dean stepped into a life that was supposed to break him, but instead built him. His solo career had secretly started earlier than people realized. That's Amore, released August 13, 1953, showed the world he didn't need a partner to shine. It reached number 2 on the charts and placed him among the biggest stars of the era. People thought he floated through life tipsy, but his calm style was a crafted mask he used to keep the world at a distance. Apple juice stood in for alcohol, and the lazy slur was practice, not intoxication. Then came August 15, 1964. Everybody Loves Somebody knocked the Beatles off the number 1 spot. Dean was 47, long past the age most singers made breakthroughs, but he held the top spot for 8 weeks. Newspapers everywhere cheered the upset. He even told Elvis he'd handle the Beatles if Elvis couldn't. It was one of those victories that felt impossible until it happened. His drunk act fooled millions. His daughter Diana explained that he used the persona to hide. Jerry confirmed it later. Even Sinatra played along with the joke, calling him a champion drinker, even though everyone close knew Dean barely drank before performing. He was shy and introverted, and pretending to be tipsy gave him a shield. It allowed him to keep his private life untouched. Then came The Dean Martin Show. From 1965 to 1974, he delivered 264 episodes. His contract became legendary. It said he didn't have to attend rehearsals. He spent his days golfing while his stand-in rehearsed with the guests. He showed up on Sundays, read from cue cards, and turned that effortless charm into top ratings. In 1968, NBC gave him a 3-year deal worth $34 million. He worked less than 4 hours per episode and still delivered one of the most iconic variety shows in television. People thought his relaxed style was laziness, but it was one of the smartest business moves in entertainment. By leaning into the persona and insisting on minimal rehearsal, he kept control of his schedule, his image, and his sanity. Fans believed he stumbled because of alcohol, not knowing it was part of a quiet plan to stay protected while building a thriving empire. It began in January 1961, when Washington was buzzing with excitement for John Kennedy's inauguration, and Sammy Davis Jr. thought he would be part of it. He had campaigned for JFK, supported him at rallies, and believed he was welcome in that circle. But everything changed when word spread that he had married Mae Britt in 1960. Interracial marriage was still illegal in 22 states, and the new administration feared angering Southern Democrats who could turn against the president before he even settled into office. So the invitation disappeared. Sammy's daughter Tracy later wrote that her father was crushed, and the pain stayed with him long after the parade ended. Dean Martin heard what happened and immediately said that if Sammy wasn't welcome, he wasn't going either. Even John Wayne, a man famous for strong political views, stayed home in support. Their choices revealed cracks in an era when fame did not protect anyone from America's tensions, and friendships sometimes carried more weight than politics. This came at a time when Dean Martin was soaring on screen. Between 1966 and 1969, he turned the Matt Helms spy series into one of Hollywood's most surprising box office waves. The Silencers brought in more than $7 million in U.S. rentals in 1966 and landed as the 11th highest-grossing film of that year. And The Ambushers reached $10 million at the U.S. box office. Audiences loved watching Dean stroll through wild sets, flirt with secret agents, and fall into gadgets that felt like toys for adults. His easy charm made the comedy work, and his own production company shared the profits, which was rare power in that era. People walked into those theaters wanting fun, and Dean delivered exactly that. Not long after, his world shifted again when he stepped into something no one else could quite replicate. From 1974 to 1984, he hosted 54 episodes of the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast, where Hollywood's biggest stars gathered to poke fun at each other under bright lights and without a script. The humor was sharp and unfiltered. Everyone from Frank Sinatra to Ronald Reagan took the stage, and nothing felt rehearsed. When Bob Hope was roasted in 1974, figures like Jack Benny and astronaut Eugene Cernan filled the front rows, laughing as Dean guided the night with a drink in his hand and a grin that never left. Ratings stayed high, and even now, clips are passed around like pieces of television history. Audiences saw something honest in those moments, something playful and free. All of this happened while the Rat Pack ruled Las Vegas. In the late 1950s and 1960s, Dean, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop turned the Sands into something close to a kingdom. Their shows were not formal concerts. They were nights where jokes moved faster than the music, where fans waited weeks for tickets, and where the stage felt like a private room that everyone wanted to enter. People saw the bond between the performers and felt part of it. Even today, documentaries return to those nights to show how 5 men could shape an entire city's image and leave a mark on American culture that never really faded. This is why John Wayne's quiet stand for Sammy Davis Jr. meant more than most knew. He was expected to be a symbol of a certain America, firm in his views, often on the opposite side of civil rights discussions. Yet when he learned Sammy was excluded, he chose not to go either. His refusal made people stop and think, because it crossed a line that many believed he would never cross. For a moment, divisions softened, and the industry saw how loyalty could stretch further than anyone imagined. As the years moved forward, Dean Martin's own story deepened in ways no film could capture. His first marriage to Elizabeth Ann MacDonald began on October 6, 1941. Together they had Craig in June 1942, Claudia in March 1944, Gail in April 1945, and Diana in August 1948. While Dean's career grew through radio shows and nightclub stages, Elizabeth stayed home with 4 young children, often alone, often overwhelmed. Their divorce on March 23, 1949, left her with about $2.91 million, a significant fortune then, but money did little to ease the loneliness she had lived with for years. Her struggles with alcohol afterward were whispered about, and the children carried the weight of a family pulled in different directions, while Dean became a star. Only months later, on September 1, 1949, Dean married Jean Bigger. She was steady, graceful, and seemed to balance the chaos around him. They had Dean Paul in November 1951, Richie in September 1953, and Gina in December 1956. Those 24 years were his most stable. He rose to greater fame, anchored by a woman who understood the cost of living beside a legend. When they divorced in 1973, Hollywood gasped because no one expected them to break apart. Dean later admitted he missed her calm presence, but knew there was no going back. Another chapter opened in 1962, when Dean worked with Marilyn Monroe on Something's Got to Give. When she was fired on June 8, 1962, he refused to film without her. Fox sued him for more than $3 million, but he would not move. Monroe was rehired within a week, yet she never returned to the set. Her death on August 5, 1962, shook Dean in ways that stayed with him. He kept a photograph of her close, a quiet reminder of a woman he believed Hollywood had mistreated. The pain grew sharper when he learned he was banned from her funeral on August 8, 1962. Joe DiMaggio controlled everything and barred Rat Pack members, blaming Hollywood for her downfall. Over 3,000 fans stood outside the cemetery as Dean stayed home, furious and heartbroken. That moment carved a space in him that never fully healed. In April 1973, he married Catherine Hahn, a 26-year-old receptionist whose sudden rise into his world stunned everyone. Their wedding glittered with lilacs and white doves. But the marriage lasted only until November 10, 1976, and when it ended, Dean told those close to him that he was done with marriage for good. Catherine disappeared from the public eye, leaving nothing but unanswered questions behind. Time kept moving, and then March 21st, 1987 arrived. His son, Dean Paul, was flying an F-4C Phantom II jet during a training mission when snow and clouds swallowed the sky over the San Bernardino Mountains. At 9,300 feet, radar contact vanished. The jet fell nearly 4,000 feet and struck the side of San Gorgonio Mountain at about 400 miles per hour. Both Dean Paul, who was 35, and Captain Ramon Ortiz, who was 39, died instantly. Search teams found the wreckage 3 days later, describing it as pulverized into the granite. It was a moment that broke Dean Martin in a way the world could see from the outside. When news reached him during a show at Bally's in Las Vegas, he stopped singing and walked off stage. The 6-day search drained him. When the bodies were found, he told Paul Anka that he was simply waiting to die. Friends said a light went out in him. Comedian Rich Little later said that part of Dean never returned. He carried his son's pilot wings every day for the rest of his life and was buried with them pinned to his chest. Before that loss, Dean's drunk act had been mostly an act. After 1987, the act faded and the drinking became real. His voice slurred because he lacked the strength to speak clearly. Frank Sinatra tried pulling him back into touring in 1988, but Dean lasted only a week. He drifted into silence, into empty rooms, into long nights that felt heavier than anything he had faced on stage. In 1993, doctors at Cedars-Sinai diagnosed him with lung cancer. They urged him toward surgery, but he refused. He kept smoking, worsening his emphysema. By late 1994, he rarely left his Beverly Hills home. He preferred quiet corners and dim rooms, choosing comfort over treatment. Many wondered why he refused help, but he seemed to have accepted his path. Those final years were almost entirely private. From 1993 to 1995, he stayed in his home on Maple Drive. Now and then, he slipped into Hamburger Hamlet on Sunset Strip, choosing a corner booth away from noise. Even Sinatra and Jerry Lewis found it hard to reach him. The colorful life he once lived faded into a stillness that he seemed to welcome. On Christmas morning of 1995, at 3:30, he passed away from acute respiratory failure brought on by emphysema, with heart failure listed as a contributing factor. He died quietly in the home he rarely left, and the city around him was wrapped in holiday calm. His wish to leave without attention was granted. Later that day, the news spread and tributes began, but the moment itself remained peaceful and private. Stories soon circulated online about unsent letters found in his desk drawer. Letters to Jerry Lewis, Frank Sinatra, Mort Viner, and even his late son. No one has confirmed them, but the idea lingered because it matched something people sensed about him. Behind his charm lived a man carrying heavy regrets. A man who struggled with loneliness long before the world knew it. Whether the letters existed or not, the feeling behind them stayed true to his final years, leaving a quiet, bittersweet echo in the story he left behind.